Brothers, I have invited to speak to us today our first guest speaker. As most of you know, we no longer live within a context of publishing houses, but a myriad of different platforms in which content creators compete to have their works published and monetized online. Among the many options available, a more civil model has begun that contains those who create written and other contents under a subscription model rather than competing to beat the algorithm for control of clicks. Our guest is a best-selling writer on the platform Substack under the name The Reversion. He also authors an account that is among the most frequently visited Orthodox sites. Today we call it X, or we used to call it Twitter. The Reversion describes itself as a publication covering esotericism, technology, and eschatology through an Orthodox Christian lens. In recent months, our guest has been trying to not only publish but engage readership through online book study, including such works as The Antichrist, the Fulfillment of Globalization, and Father Seraphim Rose's Orthodox Survival Course. Some of you I know have participated in this book club. The aim of his work is to grow an online community, to develop knowledge that strengthens the Orthodox understanding of the spirit of the age that permeates the modern West. I was first started corresponding with Anthony many months ago when I first listened to his recordings of the Lives of the Saints. Maybe some of you have heard these, called readings from the Synaxarian branded eschatology audio. Very simple recordings trying to engage the listener in hagiography of God's holy church. But the titles were not all-inclusive. Not all the days of the church year were there, but particular stories having an explicit theme of good over evil. Not good over the theory of evil or the idea of evil, but real present demonic evil that tried but ultimately failed to rival the forces of God. But what really captured my attention and pursue a friendship with Anthony was his first podcast on reversion with Conrad Franz. Some of you may know as the co-author of an excellent podcast called World War Now. The subject matter was called Space is Fake. Not unlike the rector of the parish who teaches such ideas as prayer of the heart. People think the heart is something different today. Or that Jerusalem is the center of the world, sometimes even called the center of the universe. For the Orthodox, we do not debate so-called scientific facts. This is not our area of concern. We see life through the image of the divine revealed to us. That is the Orthodox phronema. We feel quite comfortable saying things that the rest of the world calls archaic and obviously false. Much like an Orthodox priest worthy of his ministry does not try to explain away Adam and Eve, but present them as an integral part of the Christian story, as a unique way of describing the pride of man that he freely chose to live apart from God and therefore in need of a Redeemer. Therefore, I was not put off, but instead intrigued by what may be called the climax of his first episode, where amongst an interesting discussion of issues, Anthony, seemingly out of the blue, makes a rather direct announcement that space is both fake and gay, unquote. This can be dismissed out of hand, but if you look a little deeper, what is at the heart of this statement is that we no longer even have a means of engaging in and experiencing the teachings of modern science, particularly physics. Instead, these mathematical formulas imply things such as dark matter, black holes, wormholes that run contrary to our experience of daily life, our experience of reality, what we call reality. We cannot experience or test any of these ideas, but we are to believe them just the same, with the same fervor and akin to religious faith. Yet, we are considered fools for believing what we believe according to our faith. even though it is backed by experiential knowledge. We will find this teaching very clearly in amongst the works of Father Seraphim Rose, speaking of the acceptance of the geocentric view of the world. Consequently, ideas about faith, the world around us, cosmology, esotericism, are presented in a manner that is uncommon today and capture the readers and the listeners' attention in a way that is also very uncommon. Today he will present to you a lecture on Orthodox eschatology in the light of the teaching of Father Seraphim Rose, which eventually leads to transhumanism and, of course, Antichrist. I trust that you will have many questions and interesting comments. Please save them for the end, where there will be plenty of time for Q&A. Please join me in welcoming Anthony of Westgate.
Well, thank you, Father James, and everyone, brothers, for welcoming here. It's an honor and a blessing to be the first speaker at the Brotherhood, and it's great to see some of my Discord friends put a face to the name. And thank you for that. That is an amazing intro. Thank you, Father. I couldn't have said that better myself, being the publisher of that content. So thank you. So to start off, I think it would probably be appropriate to quote Father Seraphim Rose, since I will be drawing from his eschatological writings throughout this lecture. Father Seraphim says, "There is nothing of which it is more dangerous to speak than the apocalypse. Futile and over-literal speculation on apocalyptic events, only too obvious cause of spiritual harm. And no less so, I think, is facile in the way in which many of our contemporaries refer to the apocalyptic character of the times, and in so doing raise in others deep fears and hopes which their own vague pronouncements are far from satisfying. If a Christian is going to speak of the apocalypse at all, it is quite clear that in this, as in everything else, his words must be sober and precise as possibly, and fully in accord with the universal teaching of the Church." So I take these words quite seriously here, and especially since I'm still in my infancy of living the Orthodox faith and learning the teachings of the Holy Father. So I will do my best to use my own words sparingly and with intent, filtering them through Father Seraphim's own words. I firmly believe that if Father Seraphim were alive today, he would have written a great deal on this new religion of transhumanism and the evolution of man into this post-human superintelligence. In fact, you may be surprised to know that he actually did have a lot to say about transhumanism before it was even recognized as such. The leaders of this transhuman revolution are largely extreme materialists, although they are actually unknowingly religious, and not unlike many of the great thinkers of its prior revolutions. This materialism has an eschatology and a supernatural utopian realm, which is an inversion of Orthodox Christianity. It's important to understand that transhumanism, while it is philosophical and has religious roots, it cannot be understood as a cohesive ideology because it is ultimately egocentric. So there's as many transhuman philosophies as there are transhumanists. But that is not to say that there aren't prominent themes that we will see recurring among its revolutionary thinkers. So I will be covering 3 ways in which the transhumanist revolution will usher in the age of the Antichrist. By integrating false miracles with the religion of the future, by attempting to evolve mankind into a kind of super intelligent post-humanity, and by implementing this revolution through globalization. So first, there's this really interesting aspect of this transhumanist philosophy having a resurrection theme to it. So the contemporary transhumanist movement can be traced back to this subculture of West Coast futurists. This came out of Silicon Valley, and these people, had all these speculative innovations in nanotechnology, cryogenics, and believed these things would usher in this new phase of human evolution. The term transhumanism was first coined by the British eugenicist Julian Huxley, who's the brother of Aldous Huxley. You may know this name as this kind of psychedelic prophet of the 1960s. But transhumanism reached the mainstream when renowned futurist Ray Kurzweil wrote his book titled The Age of Spiritual Machines, in which he describes an entire history of human evolution through the lens of information. He wrote on how information emerged from the Big Bang and evolved in complexity through plants and animals, and then accelerated in this even more complex phase through the human minds and at an exponential rate throughout technological advancement. So you can see this kind of metaphysical language being used in even this extremely materialistic worldview. Kurzweil fantasizes that this evolution of information would ultimately lead to the complete mergence of our minds with machines, forming this post-human man. For Kurzweil, the singularity occurs when there won't be a distinction between humans and technology. It's a future period during which the pace of technological change will be so rapid, its impact so deep, that human life will be irreversibly transformed. And we will see later how close we are to this point, and you could even argue we're already there. So while Father Seraphim did not explicitly mention transhumanism, he was certainly aware of the philosophical movements that it emerged from, which can be seen in his commentary on two primary figures who were considered these precursors of the transhumanist philosophy, one being the Russian Orthodox cosmist Nikolai Fyodorov, whom Father Seraphim called a crazy prophet, disillusioned with revolutionary ideals. The other, the Jesuit philosopher Teilhard de Chardin, who, according to Father Seraphim, was most symptomatic of all of these heliastic currents which are going out into the world now. This was in the time of Father Seraphim at 1975. He goes on to say, we see today that we have the new science of cryogenics. That is, people are letting themselves be frozen in the hope that they will be resurrected in some future day where their disease will be cured. But that very idea is a chiliastic idea. I'm going to be resurrected in the future. I'm going to come back to life, very filled with this secular chiliasm. And this man, Fyodorov, puts this into the form of some kind of prophecy that in the future, this book is called The Common Task. The great task of mankind is to resurrect the ancestors. Of course, it's a wild dream, but it's very much, this is what the Antichrist will resurrect people and be able to look like resurrection, will be able to put demons into them and make them walk around again with walking corpses. So these chiliastic transhumanist dreams of altering the human biology and uploading consciousness into supercomputers, this should be understood as a secularized utopian inversion of the Christian promise of bodily resurrection. In fact, in a Rolling Stone interview, Kurzweil stated that his most ambitious plan for life after the singularity is to bring his dead father back to life using technology. He even goes on to explain how the resurrection will work. He says, we can find some of his DNA around his gravesite. That's a lot of information right there, he says. The AI will send down some nanobots and get some bone or teeth and extract DNA and put it all together. Then they'll get some information from my brain and anyone else who's still alive and remembers him. There's also, in present day, this tech billionaire, this transhumanist named Brian Johnson. It's very well known in the online discourse of around technology. And this guy has made it his life's mission to achieve immortality. by investing millions of dollars into building a growing community and brand around his arrogance. On his website, named after his slogan, "Don't Die," he very boldly declares his mission to defeat death by sheer human will. It says, "We are at war with death and its causes. We are building towards an infinite horizon. We are fighting for the freedom to exist as long as one chooses. Why? Because we have things to do tomorrow, and tomorrow's tomorrow, until we no longer want tomorrow." So totally egocentric philosophy that does, again, have these religious undertones to it. Then his predecessor, Max More, who's another famous transhumanist, he gave recognition to transhumanism's occult roots of the Renaissance alchemists when he wrote, "We have achieved two of the three alchemists' dreams. We have transmuted the elements and learned to fly. Immortality is next." So he's checking off two of the three boxes of his goal of immortality. An interesting, Fyodorov also called for a quite literal augmenting of the human body by adding wings to it. So I'm not sure how he planned to do that, but this is the delusions of these figures. So next we'll see that there's also this transcendent property to this religion that involves apotheosis, which is an inversion of theosis. So while the transhumanist efforts to evolve humanity into an immortal, super intelligent post-human is largely materialistic, there is this underlying secular eschatology which Father Seraphim Rose summarizes in Teilhard de Chardin's unitary view of reality as a joining together of the spiritual and the secular into a single harmonious and all-encompassing process, which cannot only be grasped by the modern intellectual, but can be felt by the sensitive soul that is in close contact with the spirit of modern life. Indeed, the next step of the process can be anticipated by the modern man, and that is why Desjardins is so readily accepted as a prophet, even by people who do not believe in God. And you saw this with Julian Huxley, his contemporary, who was a staunch atheist and pretty much agreed with all of Desjardins' philosophy. He announces in a very mystical way the future which every thinking man today, save for conscious Orthodox Christians, hopes for. So transhumanism has its own form of deification of the self as apotheosis. This language can be seen in the work of Israeli transhumanist Yuval Noah Harari, which you may have seen this figure or heard of him. Very strange-looking man and very kind of, involved in all of these globalist discourses. And this man has described basically a mockery of a Christian deification as an upgrade of humanity, as kind of this human 2.0. He says, "Having raised humanity above the beastly level of survival struggles, we will now aim to upgrade humans into gods and turn Homo sapiens into Homo Deus." So this apotheosis is the same self-worship of Lucifer that positions transhumanist leaders as forerunners to the Antichrist, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped. That's 2 Thessalonians 2:14. As Enlightenment philosophy sought to improve Christianity with rationalism, the apotheosis of the new post-human man becomes an inevitable conclusion to the godless ideologies of its revolutionary thinkers. And Father Peter Heers has done really great work on this. He wrote a fantastic article that I would recommend you read if you're interested in this topic. He says, "They are the contemporary successors of the previous apostles of Antichrist, Nietzsche, Marx, and other utopianists, yet now freed from the need to destroy the old order and singularity focused on the forging of singularity, this technological superintelligence, a chiliastic post-human paradise nightmare." There is an undeniable religious side to the transhumanist revolution, and we can already see this spiritual language start to develop. I would argue that this revolution is ushering in a new religious order. this cyborg theocracy. It has its own priests and prophets and heavenly realm and rituals. It has transcendence. All of these ideas are present in this very egocentric, materialistic religion. It is an effort to build a new utopia apart from Christianity, which ultimately finds itself reconstructing it. As with all revolutions, the destruction of the old order must first occur to establish the new. This phase has already been completed. It happened while we were all dazzled by its devices. For the transhumanist, the old order is religious faith. Yet, as Max Moore demonstrates, it only puts faith into the next phase of evolution. He says, "No more gods, no more faith, no more timid holding back. Let us blast out our old forms, our ignorance, our weaknesses, and our mortality. The future belongs to posthumanity." Father Seraphim Rose anticipated this next evolution as a revolutionary dream that has stirred men into performing the incredible drama of modern history. It is an apocalyptic dream, and they are quite correct who see it in a strange inversion of the Christian hope in the kingdom of heaven. So according to Teilhard de Chardin, man himself is reaching the pinnacle of his evolutionary development, which is called superhumanity. This is this idea of posthumanity. You can see it in de Chardin's philosophy. He says humanity would reach a point of development when it would detach itself altogether from the earth and unite it with Omega, a phenomenon outwardly similar to death perhaps, but in reality, simple metamorphosis and ascension to the supreme synthesis. That is this new state which is coming. He calls it the Omega point, to point out which all the creation now is ascending. So this is where it becomes very, you see these metaphysical aspects to it, even though it's almost entirely materialistic. There's another proponent of, quote, Christian transhumanism, this guy Eric Steinhardt, who contends that there is this significant overlap of ideas between the secular singularity and Teilhard's religious idea of this Omega point. Steinhardt quotes Kurzweil saying, "Evolution moves inexorably towards our conception of God, albeit never reaching its ideal." So there's this supernatural language in the way that transhumanists talk about information, as if it were this transcendental, eternal realm where consciousness can get uploaded and stored eternally in the infosphere, where it cannot be corrupted or decayed. Even in such an extreme form of materialism, there is this inescapable spirituality and religious language used by its atheistic proponents. Just listen to how Yuval Harari describes this infosphere as a new religion that he calls dataism. He says, like capitalism, dataism too began as a neutral scientific theory, but it is now mutating into a religion that claims to determine right and wrong. The supreme value of this new religion is information flow. If life is the movement of information and we think that life is good, it follows that we should extend, deepen, and spread the flow of information in the universe. According to dataism, human experiences are not sacred, and Homo sapiens isn't the apex of creation or a precursor of some future Homo Deus. Humans are merely tools for creating the Internet of all things, which may eventually spread out from planet Earth to cover the whole galaxy and even the whole universe. This cosmic data processing system would be like God. It will appear everywhere and will control everything, and humans are destined to merge into it. It's almost orthodox language, and everywhere present fills all things, right? This is how they perceive information. But it is a mistake to think that this is actually a new religion. It should be understood as an evolution of occult magic with fancy new tools and machines that make its practice more appealing to the masses. This alchemical influence of modern technology and science was recognized by Father Seraphim Rose, who said in his Orthodox Survival course that modern science was born on the experiments of the Platonic alchemists, the astrologers and magicians. The underlying spirit of the new scientific worldview was the spirit of Faustianism, the spirit of magic, which is retained as definite undertone in contemporary science today. The discovery, in fact, of atomic energy would have delighted the Renaissance alchemists very much. They were looking for that exact kind of power. And just recently, we just saw a very clear parallel to that. In the Renaissance period, there's a famous alchemist by the name of Roger Bacon, and he was known as this wizard-type figure who was doing all these wild experiments. And one thing that he's known for is what's called the brazen head, which many other alchemists had. And this is this kind of disembodied material object. It was a talking head that interacted with people, almost like what you would see today with an AI. And this talking head, there's a legend that one of Bacon's students recorded that this head was so talkative that it interrupted Thomas Aquinas in his studies, and Thomas Aquinas told it to essentially shut up. So again, you see this idea today, over 500 years later, with these devices being released today. There's one that just came out a couple weeks ago called Friend, and it's this $100 amulet. It's this AI device. It's an amulet you wear around your neck, which its creator Ari Schiffman describes as a very supportive, very validating friend that'll encourage your ideas. It also is super intelligent. It's a great brainstorming buddy. You can talk to it about relationships and things like that. It's really creepy. It actually will text you randomly and do all this crazy stuff. It's just, and the way that they advertise it is the person wearing this amulet is with real people in real life, with real friends. And they're engaging with this fake AI as a friend and sharing their secrets with it. So despite this widespread rationalism of the modern West, it's not difficult to imagine that even materialists and skeptics will be easily convinced of the technological miracles of the Antichrist. And earlier this year, we saw Elon Musk, who spoke of the first patient to receive Neuralink's implantable brain-computer interface, which they call telepathy. This is the name of this device, where he claimed even if someone has never had vision ever, like they would be born blind, we believe that we can still restore vision using Neuralink. So, even in a reply to a video that was posted on X of Elon delivering this speech, he commented that blind sight is the next Neuralink product after telepathy. So you can even see this evolution in the ways that they are going to be working these technological miracles, which is happening as we speak right now. So do you see where this is going? We still don't know how to navigate having these devices that we carry with us in our pockets every day. And they've already become attached to our bodies, essentially. While the leaders of this revolution are accelerating technological advancement beyond their own ability to comprehend its impact on humanity. And that's actually even their whole aim, is they identify themselves as accelerationists. So their whole purpose is to advance technology beyond their own control. In Raising the Mind, Warming the Heart, Father Seraphim Rose writes, "The Antichrist must be understood as a spiritual phenomenon. Why will everyone in the world want to bow down to him? Obviously, it is because there is something in him which responds to something in us, that something being a lack of Christ in us. If we will bow down to him, God forbid that we do so, it will be because we will feel an attraction to some kind of external thing, which might even look like Christianity, since Antichrist means one who is in place of Christ, or looks like Christ." So my third point is that this is all leading to this globalization, what I call digital globalization, and ultimately the building of Tower of Babel 2.0. Digital technology has colonized the West as a materialistic manifestation of man's quest to undo the confusing of the languages and build a global civilization. But this religion is only new in the sense that it has evolved into a material form. As Father Peter Heers brilliantly stated, today's transhumanists, in one sense, is nothing new. They merely seek to build the new Tower of Babel, to reach unto heaven and thus to make a name for themselves. Genesis 11:4. The Babylonians used the technology of their day, brick and mortar, whereas the new Babylonians use AI, genetic engineering, and modern technology. And just like the blind Babylonians did, with desperate actions of self-preservation, they seek life and unity outside themselves, but not in God. They imagine godlike greatness in their demonically inspired arrogance, much of which will not happen and for which they will all also be scattered and then shattered like a potter's vessel. Dostoevsky also recognized this universal effort to build a new Babel. In The Brothers Karamazov, he writes, mankind as a whole has always striven to organize a universal state. Oh, the ages are yet to come of the confusion of free thought, of their science and cannibalism. For having begun to build their Tower of Babel without us, they will end, of course, with cannibalism. Their efforts to achieve material immortality will ultimately end in the same death that awaits us all. But like the Grand Inquisitor wisely stated, if immortality is achievable without God, then nothing will be immoral. Everything will be lawful, even cannibalism. This transhumanist revolution is not brought about from a violent overthrowing of a government with blood and gunfire. Instead, we were colonized from within by a digital swarm we ourselves invited into our lives, surrendering our will to being controlled by its algorithms that are engineered by techno-globalists we wouldn't even willingly invite into our own homes. How many of us feel naked when we go outside without our mobile device with us? I know I'm guilty of it. It's a very anxious and unsettling feeling at times if you're too overly attached to your device. That is the digital swarm invading our very human biology, causing us to feel the anxiety of this phantom pain that is so common among the human experience that it's shocking when we're detached from these devices. Posthuman man is so enslaved to technology he feels less free without it. In an interview with Russian state TV, Patriarch Kirill said, smartphone users should be careful when using the World Wide Web of gadgets because it represented an opportunity to gain global control over mankind. He says, every time you use your gadget, whether you like it or not, whether you turn on your location or not, somebody can find out exactly where you are, exactly what your interests are, and exactly what you are scared of. If not today, then tomorrow, methods and technology could appear that will not only provide access to all information, but will also allow the use of this information. Do you imagine what power will be concentrated in the hands of those who gain knowledge about what is going on in the world? Such control from one place forebodes the coming of the Antichrist. And to think our consumerist society not only invited this technological slavery into their lives, but they get in line and they pay more money for the new upgrades, which always will include more invasiveness, more dependence, and more, quote, convenience. That's always the trade-off. Is the allure is like, oh, this is more convenient, everyone has it, I want to be part of this next evolution. And even you see this globalization happening before us. Even in September 2022, very quietly this happened. I would be surprised if anyone here even knew about this. But President Biden quietly mandated an executive order titled Executive Order on Advancing Biotechnology and Biomanufacturing Innovation for a Sustainable, Safe, and Secure American Bioeconomy. That's the name of the executive order. And the word safe should ring a bell there if anyone familiar with the Orwellian doublespeak of recent tyrannical U.S. government mandates such as safe and effective vaccines. This is a quote from this executive order. The United States needs to invest in foundational scientific capabilities. We need to develop genetic engineering technologies and techniques to be able to write circuitry for cells and predictably program biology in the same way in which we write software and program computers, unlock the power of biological data, including through computing tools and artificial intelligence. For some reason, I doubt Joe Biden wrote those words, but that is his executive order. Someone probably helped him sign it for him. These are the words of Dr. G.M. Davis, by the way. He says in his book, The Antichrist, the Fulfillment of Globalization, that this widespread continued notion to gain momentum since the Enlightenment is that of technical sciences, which possesses unlimited potential to improve the human condition. Everywhere science and technology are proposed as answers to the world's ills, from bad health, physical and mental, to poverty, political strife, social decay, even mortality itself. Whatever problem that plagues the human condition, there exists now a science that holds out the promise of, quote, solving it. So this should all be understood as a spiritual battle, which we all will face for the rest of our time here on earth. One which will only accelerate in its intensity, along with technological advancement. It doesn't mean we need to become Luddites. Modern technology offers some incredible advantages which make our everyday lives more convenient than previous generations in human history. In fact, I would not be delivering this lecture to you right now without it, and not just because I have it here on my laptop, because Father James and I first connected online, as he said, through my online Orthodox community. And I would likely not even be Orthodox if it were not for the internet. It was incredibly helpful in introducing me to the writings of the church and other Orthodox Christians who I was able to establish real relationships with. So I believe that the internet, for example, is primed for the spread of orthodoxy throughout the modern world. But just as art is not neutral, technology is not neutral. The creators of these technologies cannot be trusted to be unbiased because it is impossible for them to not infuse their beliefs with their creations. All technologies are biased and come with a trade-off. So I believe it is becoming increasingly more important for us as Orthodox Christians to be mindful of these technologies that we integrate into our lives, and to be watchful of this aimless direction that the technocrats are driving us towards. And we need to be making efforts to push back against it, even if it means missing out on some of the great, quote, conveniences that the world is blindly adopting. Or, as St. Ignatius Brianchanov said, to know the spirit of the age, to avoid its influence. We must hold technology captive to the obedience of Christ. If it doesn't serve us in guiding us closer to theosis, it will enslave us. So, just as I've opened with the words of Blessed Father Seraphim Rose, I will close with them here. He says, our times, however, are so filled with what could be called apocalyptic events that we should be very aware of them. Our Lord says that although we do not know the day and the hour, we should take example from the fig tree, which when its leaves become green, we know that summer is close. Likewise, when all these things begin to happen, when it becomes possible for there to be one world government, when the gospel is being preached to all peoples, when so many spiritual currents are coming into being, which are obviously deceptive, they are clearly the signs that something momentous is about to happen and are likely bound up in the end of the world. In order to be spiritually prepared for this, it is very instructive for us to be reading about what happens to people in prison camps. Such accounts show us that no matter what might happen, even if we are under Antichrist himself and placed in a prison, we can survive because we have Christ. The lives of martyrs have always been a source of instruction and edification, and even today, people are being martyred whom we can learn about. So that's all I've got. That's my close. I'm just going to let Father Seraphim close there, so thank you.
All right, anybody have any questions?